Hello and welcome. My name is Zafar Iqbal and you are watching the Mojo Story. African Union is the latest entrant to the G20 organization. Prime Minister Modi emphasized the need for a human-centric approach to navigate the challenge of the 21st century. In his address to the leaders of the G20 summit today, he welcomed them initially all one by one, and then he made that welcome speech. He appealed for global unity to transform the trust deficit into mutual confidence. He emphasized on Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas, the idea of inclusivity. That was the focus of Prime Minister Modi. To discuss this and more, we're joined by an eminent panel. We're joined by uh, Lieutenant Colonel KG Singh. He joined us. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show. He's an army veteran. Bharat Ramanan, international affairs expert, also joins us. Chirayu Thakkar, who's the foreign policy expert, National University of Singapore. He also joins us on the show. Welcome all to the show. If I may start with you, Bharat, India is playing a key role for global leaders to come together to work, to mitigate the trust deficit at a time when there is a war between Ukraine and Russia, and it's a post-pandemic world. How do you see India taking that role in the G20 summit so far? It's happened since yesterday. All the leaders have arrived, and Prime Minister Modi has made his welcome speech.
Thanks, Zafar, for having me. I think, part of the answer lies in your question as well. This morning, post the speech, the African Union has been admitted as a new member. That tells you that when Modi proposed this in June, and the fact that this has now happened tells you that, there's an enormous amount of credibility that India is now being able to demonstrate at the global level. That's just one example of how, that assertion is increasingly prominent. And kudos to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, of course, for being able to do this at scale. And I think that's one of the small reasons why India is now being taken more seriously. Even the preparations for the summit, the way they've gone about it, has been extraordinary. I think many countries, including representatives of the EU, have gone on record to suggest very much the same.
Yes, and preparations have been going on for months altogether. There were so many meetings that were held, even in places like Arunachal Pradesh and Kashmir, in all these months. And Amitabh Kant yesterday said that the joint sort of declaration is also ready, and it's for the leaders to take it forward. Chirayu Thakkar, do you think that there is a lot of talk whether that will happen, the joint statement or not? Do you think that in the end, India would play that important role of a consensus builder and there will be a joint statement?
Thank you, Zafar, for having me. I think India played a very similar role in Indonesia, even though it was not India's presidency. It played the role of a consensus builder, and subsequently, Sergei Lavrov, he said that it's a majority document, it's not a consensus document. But at the time when that document was released, in fact, everyone agreed upon, and it was not an immediate reaction, something they subsequently pulled off as a stunt. Now, I think there is a high likelihood, and whoever I'm speaking to, they are all telling me that there will be a document. But even though some bits of it remain controversial, there are a majority of issues on which Indians have worked very hard to build consensus. Also, you have to understand that certain issues are on which we know each country's position, where each country stands. Because, for example, climate financing, terrorism related issues, cryptocurrency, their national positions are well known to us, not only in this G20, the previous G20, or the United Nations, or similar other a lot of forums. So once you know the positions of each country, is building that minimum common denominator is not difficult, and Indians are known to out talk someone and bring to the consensus table. And I think that's where the skill of Indian diplomacy will be put to test.
Indians are experts in building that consensus. Colonel KJ Singh, there have been there are many bilaterals on the agenda Prime Minister Modi already had a bilateral with President Joe Biden. What do you make of this? These bilateral meetings, they will also help to foster more cooperation between different countries, India and the other countries. Uh, we are not sure whether there will be a bilateral with uh, uh, Justin Trudeau, but other leaders. There are many bilateral meetings that are slated to take place.
Thank you for having me, Zafar. Yes, these bilaterals they're having is basic with America and all is basically for more economic and military cooperation, right? And with other countries also similarly. And I don't think the heads of state ever go into the realm of UN declarations and all that is done at the Sherpa level. So what it happens or not is a different matter. One thing I like to state that no amount of military aid from America at present can possibly replace the Russian equipment which we have at least for a decade plus. I don't see that happening. Yes, jet deals and all may happen. They will not give technology. They will not transfer technology to us. They will transfer only the screwdriver assembly of jet engines. And with all other heads of state, basically with France, we already have a lot of military equipment coming basically from the Air Force. And it will be impossible to replace the entire armor and the guns, the medium guns of the Indian Army immediately or even in the next 10 years with American equipment.
But
So,
I don't think I don't think India is aiming to replace the entire Russian armory with the American armory. But what is important is that there is a talk about transfer of technology, and jet engines is one pointed in that direction. Bharat, would you agree that that is the concession that America is giving to India, which is not giving to other countries?
Yeah, I think I would, maybe gently differ with the Colonel on the technology transfer aspect, because in the last state visit, I think there was, a statement made to the same effect. So in that sense, perhaps there is a concession that the Americans have made to the Indians, which also, again, goes back to your initial question about how India is being able to assert itself on the global level. And I also do think that while the Colonel is absolutely right, it's not, it's not India's objective to try and replace all of Russia's current military hardware. And for another 10 years or so, I don't think that's likely. But I think that progression of getting that kind of support from the US, which in the past really wasn't the case. I think that's changing, and that's a dramatic shift.
Yeah, Jirai, we've been focusing on Russia, America, China, but we saw from those visuals, MBS came and there was a warm hug by Prime Minister. India has reached out to Middle East and successfully so in the last 10 years, and that has turned around the situation. Now you can see he's going to be here on a state visit also after the summit meeting is over.
Yes, Zafar, you bring a very important point here. Look, G20 is not only about great power relations, it is also about engaging with middle powers, regional powers, and emerging economic powerhouses in all the regions. So, in that way, it should be looked in broader perspective. Of course, it's challenging to build a consensus given the current geopolitical flux that we are in, especially with the ongoing war, to create a minimum common denominator between Russia, China, US, and the European Union, so far as the central document is concerned. But apart from that, this allows you to have an exchange of ideas with all other equally emerging partners. So, on the one hand, you are now talking with all the Middle Eastern countries for this great infra-connectivity project that the Deputy NSA of the United States has confirmed today morning. Apart from that, you're also talking to other ASEAN partners with whom you had a talk just yesterday, and now you're re-emphasizing your bilateral wish to take this relationship forward. So I think this allows to hammer out, iron out some of the wrinkles that you have in relationship, give you more exposure, and more importantly, you are giving them the first-hand exposure of what India is or why India is a major economy. I mean, at an abstract level, they know, but the importance of India is something that you are showing to them, demonstrating to them in your own home turf. So I think G20 should be looked not only in terms of great power relationship, but also in terms of middle and emerging economies.
You raised the point of connectivity, such an important point, KJ Singh. It's a world which is connected now more than any time in the past. And China has already been focusing on their BRI project. The China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is a flagship program in Pakistan. We don't know where it's going. But connectivity in Middle East and other countries, that's going to be a game changer. And that is being talked about.
Yes, that is being talked about, and that's good. But there's one question which I have is that we are a major economy. We are not yet a major economy. We are an emerging economy. If our GDP is number 3 or so many trillion, etc., is of not much consequence as long as the per capita doesn't go up. And our manufacturing is still nascent. It is not very advanced. Other than the IT sector, I don't think we are yet capable of calling ourselves a major economy. Right? Yes, compared to the Middle East and the African countries, we are way, way above. But compared to the other developed countries, no, we are way behind. So I would label ourselves as an emerging economy, not yet. Yes, we are on the way to becoming a major economy.
And Bharat, would you agree that the inclusion of the African Union, that is going to be very significant expansion of G20 as an organization, or it will prove counterproductive? There will be too many countries in this organization. There will be more symbolism, less substance, or if there is a balance, there's a lot of symbolism but substance as well.
Well, look, I think it's improbable that a global forum like the G20 should not have one of the largest continents on the planet not represented. So in that sense, I think it's a good thing. As for many countries coming into the picture, I don't think that's a problem, simply because I think the African Union is a representative of all the other countries in that continent. So in that sense, I think they will only reflect those views. To the extent to which they might have influence is another question altogether. But as far as the African Union being part of the G20 is concerned, I think it's an absolutely welcome move, and I think long overdue.
Absolutely. Chira, you would agree to that it's a significant inclusion in the G20 organization. But, countries like China may not have a problem with the inclusion of African Union, but they have issues on other counts. And, Russian president also did not turn up for the meeting. Do you think, but there are similarities also, China and India can at least come together as far as climate change is concerned. That is where there's a commonality, and that's where they can speak in a common language to the West, to the developed world.
So, Zafar, you raised 3 questions, and allow me to answer each one of them separately. So, the first one is of African Union. Now, look, African Union, this G20. Let's look at the trajectory of G20. G20 was originally a macroeconomic forum where all of the major economies work together to iron out the challenges so that there is a global stability so far as economic issues are concerned. Now, 20 years down the line, if you look at today's G20, or 15 years down the line, if you look at today's G20, we are talking about agriculture, we are talking about climate, we are talking about crypto, we are talking about financing, we are talking about debt restructuring, we are talking about multilateral banks. So there, the scope of G20 is continuously expanding. Now, with this kind of norm-setting agenda, or making everyone agree on certain global rules, if that is going to be the remit of the G20, and it is not only an economic forum, then you require African Union, which is affected the most by many of these decisions that you take. Therefore, in that context, having African Union was long overdue since this institution started expanded its remit, and I think it's to great of India's credit that they have included the African Union. So that's the first aspect, that it was an a governance imperative at a global level to have an institution like or a bloc like African Union. Also, if you look, Jafar, from purely numbers perspective, now African Union collectively stands in its output somewhere around 3 trillion. So it is also a major economic bloc. If you can include the European Union as a collectivity, why not include the African Union as a collectivity? That was a hugely unfair step towards that bloc. So in that context, I think it was long overdue and the right step has been taken. A corrective has been provided to G20. The second point you mentioned about China. Now, look, China has to decide what role it wants to play. A lot of people I see, they are speaking on Twitter and they are providing commentary that it has been India's loss, so on and so forth, or the Chinese president not coming. But I think it is also the Chinese president's loss that he missed this much of a forum. He could have pull aside with a lot of people, so on and so forth. So I think whether China wants to play the role of a spoiler or it wants to cooperate on the issues where they can cooperate. So you pose the question, can China and India pose a collective front on common issues like climate? Well, it's absolutely possible if they want to pose a collective front. But the issue is, India has shown willingness by going out of its way. India has extended the limb. India hosted and Prime Minister swung on the banks of Sabarmati with the Chinese leader. Now it is for them to decide that whether or not certain areas, non-controversial areas, they want to work together with India or not. And if they want to continue to play this kind of antagonistic role, they are most welcome to. But the world is watching them and it reduces their leverage to leave a global footprint. So we are not advisors to the Chinese leadership, but it is for them to decide what their role have to play. And if it were we would say on minimum areas of cooperation, on non-controversial issue, go to such forum, be a part of solution, don't always be a part of the problem.
Right. KJ Singh, what could be the reason that China's SCO or BRICS, China is in the driver's seat? But here it's a bigger forum, larger forum. China, this presidency doesn't take part in it, although he's never skipped it in the past. Do you think that China feel that it doesn't get the amount of attention it would get in a smaller forum, and that's why it tries to, not play to its strength when it comes to a G20?
You see, firstly, I have issues with China's not having enough leverage. Leverage in international relations come with your economic and your military might. More so in today's world with economic might. That leverage of China will always remain. And swinging on a swing in Ahmedabad or wherever, this is just for optics. It is of no consequence, really. Right? Modi is fond of doing that. He did that in Chennai also. And just getting away slightly, I understand that in Chennai, Xi proposed to Modi that we will let the settled populations in Nifa, in Arunachal Pradesh remain, we won't touch it, and you sort out Ladakh with us, the western border. I thought that was a very good proposal. Anyway, that's again digressing from this thing. But then China's leverage shall always remain, whether they think that they will not get as much attention. That's rather far-fetched. There's Russia, there's China, there's America. These are the big powers. And along with the smaller, big, let's say to some extent, France, Britain, and economically Japan. So there is no that China would not get enough attention or not. No, I'm not buying that. China has its own role in the world. It's a big economic power and a big military power. It's getting to be a very big military power. Like Mao Zedong said that many years ago, Churchill said that it's a sleeping giant. When it wakes up, the earth will shake. And they've already started shaking the earth.
Right. But Bharat, then could it be just to send a signal to India, and also just being uncomfortable with the amount of the number of leaders, Western leaders coming and having bilateral meeting? There has to be some reason.
Well, look, Zafar, from a symbolic standpoint, if you want to read too much into President Xi not coming, that's one thing. But I tend to leave the symbolism to the symbol-minded. Honestly, this is not the first time that a world leader hasn't attended a summit, and this is not going to be the last either. And also, let's not forget, in the past, India, China, or even many of these forums, it always happened at the prime ministerial level. That is, prime minister to prime minister. And in this particular case, you do have the prime minister of China, premier, attending the summit. So in that sense, they've not really washed their hands off it. I think that would be a wrong reading of the picture. As far as more specific issues are concerned, for example, on climate change, my understanding is that the Chinese are working closely with the Indians to try and forge an understanding. I think there are more serious issues on which I don't think India has particular amount of leverage or control. For example, the issue on Ukraine. And those are just part of the course. That's just the nature of the way international relations plays out. And as the Colonel rightly points out, it's all a question around how much economic and military might you possess. And to that extent, I think China, it would be wrong to assume that they're not punching above their weight. They most certainly are.
Chirayu, if we don't know whether there will be a joint statement in the end or not, but if there is no joint statement, that means that Russia and China have in fact imposed their sort of a will on the entire summit. If there is a joint statement that's more accommodative, then perhaps India has been successful to build around a consensus and to come up with a joint statement. What is your assessment? Do you think that will happen in the end?
Zafar, people in media fraternity and people in academic fraternity tend to assess this kind of summitry very differently. So we both have slightly different vantage points, and pardon me for having pointed this out. Look, you are right, or a section of media is right to obsess with the joint statement, whether you were able to keep up the tradition or not, or whether you were collectively able to produce a document which is consensus where everyone agrees with every bullet point. That is fine. But G20 Jamboree is not only about producing one document. There have been 250 documents, 250 events, pardon me, and all those meetings, they start from senior principals level, such as the finance minister, your central bank governors. They go down all the way to junior principals, and they work on like tourism working group, on this working group, on that working group. And here are the 20 leading countries who come to iron out a lot of differences, which then translate into effective multilateral documents. Immediately after this, you have the UNGA summit, where a lot of differences, minute differences held up there, could be resolved in this kind of smaller settings, where the real countries, those who are affected by those kind of decisions, they create a consensus. And then building on that, once you have all the major economies agreeing to something, getting others on board gets easier, and you produce a lot of multilateral outcomes based on this. So if you are someone who is interested in multilateral diplomacy on crypto, you would be using a magnifying lens and reading the fine print on what these countries or economies have agreed upon. So I think that is the real outcome of this summitry. A long, nicely worded, a document may or may not be produced. Of course, if they are able to produce it, so see, this document primarily is indicative of how fractious our current world order is. And we all know, by virtue of what other things are happening, that the current world order is extremely fractious. So in this polarizing time, producing a final outcome document may or may not be possible, and that's fine. We can obsess over it for time being. But there are a lot of positive things happening in this expanded, augmented agenda, and I think the more that has happened, that is the real output of this summitry, rather than one single document.
Yes, it does not matter if a statement is produced or not. But KJ Singh, do you think that India has played an important bridge between the developed world and the developing world? It has tried its best to form that bridge between the two blocks.
Yes, it definitely has. But as far as the world has never been so fractious as it is now, no, it is not so. Ever since NATO and Warsaw Pact came into being, the world has been fractious. In fact, the best time we ever had was when the USSR broke up. That is the only time, a short period, when NATO didn't expand, we had easier times. Once NATO started expanding closer to Russia, and it has become fractious again. And it is heading towards bigger fractiousness. Yes, India is trying to bring it closer, but besides the optics, I wonder, without economic might and military might, how much heft you have in international relations, I'm not sure of that. These other two gentlemen are far more knowledgeable. Maybe they'll be able to throw light. That is our heft really there, or it is just optics?
No, the point is that okay, China is 5 times bigger economy than India, but it's also a world of ideas, of of soft power, as they say, consensus building. If India is able to fill in that space, Bharat, would you agree that it will uh, it will emerge as a strong voice around the world? It will be taken more seriously, and it will be listened to.
The short answer to that is that we've just made a beginning. So I
Yeah.
think it's important to recognize that that beginning has been made. Have we therefore started to make a big change and effect that change at the world stage already? I think that's debatable. And to a large extent, perhaps the Colonel is right. Maybe we're not there yet. But that beginning is absolutely crucial. And I think that's what this government, to its credit, has been able to do. And even when you look at past summits, I mean, when previous governments have been in power in our country, the idea of being able to influence debates of the day hasn't ever been as important as it's become today. And I think those ideas are finding resonance in global capitals. I think you're seeing that happen when the Prime Minister travels to Western capitals. And I think you're seeing that at play even in the G20. As far as the communique is concerned, I'm not particularly fussed about whether they actually have a jointly agreed communique. And as Chirayu rightly points out, that may or may not happen. But what will happen, I think, is that we are making a statement on the global stage, and that is being acknowledged by the world. I think that's important to recognize. So, half begun is well done, is what I'd say.
Chirag, you would agree to that half begun is well done, and India has been making strides in that direction. Prime Minister Modi went to the US, and now the US president coming and taking it up forward. The transfer of technology and other issues. There may be a roadblock or slow movement as far as India UK issues are concerned, but on the American front, it's moving at quite a brisk pace.
Yes, look, if you look at the 20 major economies, or 20 major partners that are coming together, or 21 major partners that are coming together in this particular event right now, we have cordial ties with most, if not all of them. So I think India is definitely punching above its weight. India has also created a huge event out of this summitry, which is usually cyclical in nature. Look, 10 years ago, there was an India Africa Forum Summit. More heads of state and government came, but it was mostly like what a small column on the front page of the newspaper. Nobody was obsessed. Of course, having heads from African Union and having the 20 most powerful leaders of the world to come together, there's a difference in terms of order of magnitude. But regardless, this government has made a huge event out domestically, and also in terms of international outreach, it has made huge effort. This opportunity befell upon this government, and it has made sure that it is reaching out to the widest possible agenda possible within what it can do, within the remit of G20, what it can do. So I think a lot of effort is being made there to make sure that the event is successful, both as a domestic spectacle, but also as an international norm setting success. And I think Lieutenant Colonel Saab was right there, that it is a mix of hard power and soft power. Hard power doesn't ensure you that automatically you have the soft power to set the agenda. Japan has been a wealthy country for a lot of years, but we don't know any institution that Japan has started. Look at India. The moment we started getting the hard power, and I'll give you only one example, we institutionalized the International Solar Alliance. Now 122 countries are there, and a lot of institutions have a pledge over $1 trillion for the Sun Belt countries. So I think this is your ability to create norms, institutions. India has been doing this for ages, since its inception. Look at the non-line movement. Look at a lot of other smaller steps that we have taken over the years, even where we did not have the power. And so far as others reciprocating to our soft power initiative, you also have to keep in mind that it is not your present might. people also take the rate at which you are growing. So today, if you are only a 3 trillion economy, people know that your size is going to increase to 5 trillion in the coming 5 years, and maybe 10 trillion in the coming 15 years. So it is this broader long-term perspective for which people are vying. They want a larger chunk of your market. Do you think the UK is right now pushing for what currently we are? No, it is trying to pitch in for what we are going to be tomorrow and the day after and the day after. So it is usually the power differential, the rate of growth at which people keep in mind, and that's way. India's hard power may be limited tomorrow, but we have a bright future ahead. We are a bright economy moving ahead, and that allows us to set the norm, that allows us to convince people, that allows us to set the agenda. And the prime minister and the people in the administration, they know it, and therefore they are actively pitching that potential and trying to make the maximum out of this opportunity.
KJ Singh, India is a growing economy. They're looking at the future of India, not the present. And also, Chirayu was saying, the focus areas like renewable energy. There will be a lot of talk about that in these deliberations also. So you have to essentially see where the attention is.
Right, we are going in the right direction, renewable energy, etc., soft power. No country, right, especially a diverse country like ours, can ever have clout till at such time your internal polity is fractious, right? Till at such time you stop picking on people's religion and their divisiveness, right, and their sectarianism. Leaders must unite. They cannot be dividing like this. You will never ever be a big power unless you are united. And there are so many differences, which are really not differences, but are being created as differences, right, amongst the populace, which is not augur very well for our future. Right? It is like it can have very serious consequences for our unity. After all, we are only 75 years old. And it is, I must insist, which is going to say something now which is controversial. It is the British who created India. Right? If the British were not there, we would still have been the Raja Maharajas fighting with each other. So we have to keep India as it is. That's much more important, which a lot of people don't just realize.
And perhaps that's why the Prime Minister emphasized on Sabka Saath. Bharat, specifically coming to Justin Trudeau.
I want to say, Sabka Saath is a cliche, right? That's saying it. But what's happening on the ground is completely different from Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas.
Right. Bharat, the point here is that I specifically coming to Justin Trudeau and Sheikh Hasina, there are problems with Canada for some time now. Their glorification of the killers of Indira Gandhi and Sheikh Hasina. There is a problem in Bangladesh. The elections are around the corner. India has a good equation with Sheikh Hasina. So those are also important, elements in the G20. So we don't know whether Prime Minister will hold a bilateral with Justin Trudeau. He already had with Bangladesh. What is your reading of the situation, assessment on those two counts?
Zafar, on Canada, I think we have made a very strong protest given the events that have happened in the past couple of months. And I don't think that has been neglected or it's gone out of neglect from the Canadian government's perspective. And the fact that Justin Trudeau is there at the G20 suggests that he also recognizes the importance that India plays. And I have no doubt in my mind that they will try and make amends. I don't see any country can possibly justify, this sort of separatist, sentiment being spread in their countries and also threatening, Indian diplomats and representatives on their soil, and then expect suddenly to be respected at the world stage if they're not taking actions to prevent such sort of thing from happening. So in that sense, I do think that India has been able to make its point very clearly. On the Bangladesh piece, I think, as you rightly pointed out, we have very strong relations with them. I think it's probably one of the most strongest regional relationships that we have at the moment, not just on the economic front, but also politically, given the relationship, not just with this current government, also in the past. So in that sense, I think it bodes well because it's important that the neighborhood first principle, comes back to the fore, although we do have some trouble with some of our other neighbors. But I think it's important to recognize that Bangladesh is one of those big, good success stories and one of those events that could dramatically change the fortunes of the South Asian region. And let's not forget, they're one of the largest countries in terms of population density. And they're also one of the largest, fastest growing economies today. So in that sense, the India-Bangladesh story is a success story. And I think that will be reflected in bilateral meetings on the sidelines of the G20 as well.
Right, neighborhood first. So that's the time we have on the show. We may have to wrap it up here. But thanks so much to all our panelists for joining us, and thanks so much for watching.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.